Oh, shit. I overslept again. I'm going to be late. After falling back to sleep, I jumped out of bed only to see that it was already past the time to leave my house. In a rush, I washed my face and got dressed, grabbed my bag, and jumped on my bicycle. My name is Michael. After graduating from college, I have been working at a local bank, and it's my second year as a banker. I think I handle my job quite well, but I get scolded by my boss almost every day. Today's definitely going to be a lecture for being late. Maybe I should call in sick. While sighing, I headed to the station. Upon arriving at the station, I parked my bike and headed to the platform. The train was still crowded, and despite it being winter, I jumped on while sweating profusely, earning frowns from the other passengers. I pulled out a wrinkled handkerchief from my pocket and wiped the sweat off my face to regain my composure. Then I took my tie out of my bag and used the window as a mirror to tie it. I realized I had bad hair, but there was nothing I could do about it. I'll just wet it and fix it at the station bathroom. I waited for the train to arrive at the station. I moved to a place near the entrance of the train at the station one before I got off. This way, I could be the first to get off at my next stop. I might still make it on time. With a faint hope, I jumped off the train when the doors opened and headed to work. When I arrived at work, the morning meeting had already started, and as I opened the door, everyone looked my way. Good morning. Running made my throat dry, and I greeted them with a hoarse voice. Everyone laughed while looking at me, except for one person, my boss, John, who always seemed to unfairly target me. John glared at me and said,
Michael, what time do you think it is? Besides, how are you going to serve customers with that hair?
At his words, a few colleagues giggled. I'm sorry. I noticed the bad hair on the train and meant to fix it in the bathroom at the station, but I forgot. As I responded, everyone except John burst into laughter. John got even more heated.
Why are you so forgetful? You can't even remember the tasks I taught you yesterday. When are you going to get it right? Think about my position as your trainer. I can't deal with this. Just quit.
John, having raised his voice too much, began to cough. I tried to go over and pat his back, but he brushed my hand away.
I don't need your help. Just fix your hair and redo the documents I instructed you to do yesterday.
John then gave me my tasks for the day. I tried to redo the documents, but since he hadn't specified what was wrong with them, I was stuck. Watching me from the side, John fidgeted with frustration, and the vibration of his leg shaking reached my desk. This is bad. He's really in a bad mood. What should I do? I have no idea what's wrong with these documents. I even copied the format John had used, so why a redo? I started sweating coldly. Should I ask John, or should I try to figure it out on my own? As I hesitated, John grabbed my arm and said,
Do you even want to work? Just staring at your computer isn't going to get the job done.
He berated me unilaterally. I'm sorry. Could you please tell me what's wrong with these documents? I might as well ask what I want to know since I'm getting scolded anyway.
The way you've structured the tables and the placement of graphs, the overall layout is just bad. No one's going to read it if there's too much text. Reduce the word count and summarize more concisely.
John gave me these instructions, but I accidentally let some things slip. But these documents, they're just your documents with the figures switched around." Hearing this, the female employee around us burst out laughing. Embarrassed, John grabbed a cigarette from his drawer and walked out towards the smoking area. He seems to calm himself by smoking when he's irritated, but apparently, since he became my boss, he's been smoking more.
Michael and John's exchanges are just too funny. But John is really hard on Michael. It's kind of pitiful.
I'm slow at my job. I think John is struggling because he can't get his own work done either, so I feel bad. I casually defended John, and after a while, he returned, seemingly more composed. Nevertheless, he continued to scold me as I finished up the documents for the day.
Don't be late tomorrow. Head home and get to bed early.
That day, I managed to leave work on time, but John was preparing the documents required by a client. He seems to carve out time during the day for my training, putting off his own work until after hours, and often works late into the night. He may be harsh, but he cares about his colleagues and is competent at his job. On my way home, I stopped by an electronics store and bought 3 alarm clocks to prepare for the next day's work. The next morning, I continued to stop the alarms every 10 minutes, and by the 3rd clock, I was fully awake. I had plenty of time for breakfast and managed to have a leisurely morning before work for the first time in a while. I washed my face, shaved, brushed my teeth, and fixed my hair, and still had 20 minutes before I needed to leave. But I left early, thinking I couldn't afford to be late today. While biking to the station, at a traffic light, I saw an elderly man running early in the morning next to me, catching his breath. When our eyes met, I inadvertently greeted him. "Good morning."
"Good morning. You look good."
The elderly man responded kindly. As the light turned green and I was about to pedal my bicycle, the elderly man clutched his chest and collapsed. I hit the brakes hard, got off my bike, and approached him. "Are you okay? Does your chest hurt?" The elderly man, clutching his chest in pain, whispered hoarsely,
"Call an ambulance for me, please."
Startled, I took out my cell phone to call an ambulance and asked if there were any first aid measures I could perform over the phone. The emergency responders instructed me to cover the elderly man with a coat if I was wearing one. I took off my coat and covered him to keep him from getting cold. The roads were busy during the morning rush hour, so it took a while for the ambulance to arrive, and I was anxious as the ambulance seemed to never come. As I frequently checked the time, it soon reached the time for the morning meeting, and I called the office. A female teller I spoke to yesterday answered.
Michael, what are you doing? Are you late again? John is furious. What? An elderly man who fell and called an ambulance. But it hasn't arrived yet? Okay, I'll pass it on.
After hanging up the phone and returning to the morning meeting, she explained why I was late. The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later, and while waiting, the elderly man seemed to improve and could talk. His name is Walter, and he lived alone, having been widowed. He said he had no relatives or children, making him completely alone. Having lost my father early and my mother just 3 years ago, I could not feel indifferent to Walter's situation. As Walter was loaded into the ambulance, I informed ambulance crews that he had no next of kin. They looked troubled. "I have to get to my office, but please let me know the hospital you're taking him to. I'll do whatever I can to help with his care. Here's my contact information." Although I had to go to the office, I couldn't just leave Walter, so I handed my business card to the ambulance crews and headed to work. They agreed and departed for the hospital, and I watched the ambulance until it was out of sight, then hurried to my office. When I arrived, the bank had already started its operations, and I went to my manager, Tom, to report the morning's events.
I heard the report during the morning meeting. How was the condition of the person who collapsed?
It seemed to improve a bit while waiting for the ambulance, and we had a chat. He has no one to take care of him or any relatives. I have no relatives either, so it's not someone else's issue for me. I told the ambulance crews I'd take care of him during his hospital stay, so please let me know once they know which hospital he's in. Then, Tom praised me.
That's good of you. I'll talk to John about having other staff cover any overtime. Hopefully, he'll get better soon.
Thank you, sir. As I was about to head to my desk, Tom asked me to call John over, so I nervously greeted John and informed him that Tom was calling for him.
Did you mess up again? What is it during this busy time?
Grumbling, John went to talk to Tom and came back soon after.
Lucky you, Michael. Looks like you won't have to do overtime for a while. I can focus better without an extra body around, but make sure you work hard during regular hours.
Typical of John, his words were a mix of encouragement. Later, I received a call from the hospital about Walter's condition and their thanks. I asked for the room number and if it was okay to visit him in the evening.
That's fine. Walter also wants to thank you in person, and visiting hours are until 7 p.m. Please be advised.
When I looked up the location of the hospital where Walter was taken, it was only a 5-minute bike ride from my house. That day, John's strict supervision was as usual, but he was mindful of the time and allowed me to prepare to leave early. When quitting time arrived, I left work and headed to the hospital. Since the hospital was located just past my house from the nearest station, I decided to go home and change into casual clothes first. Upon arriving at the hospital, I informed the receptionist that I was there to visit Walter. I had heard that Walter was conscious and able to converse, which relieved me, but I was still nervous before entering his room. I knocked on the door of his room and gently opened it to find Walter sitting up and looking outside. "Hello," I said as I entered. Walter noticed me and greeted me with a smile.
I'm sorry for the inconvenience this morning. Thanks to you, you saved my life. Thank you very much.
Walter thanked and apologized with great politeness. Not at all. Rescuing lives is the top priority. My boss also said there's no need for overtime for now, and to take care of your personal needs. Seeing his surprised look, I shared that I was in a similar situation and that my company was understanding.
Thank you for everything. The hospital stay will include some tests and should be about a week. As you know, I was jogging, so I only had my house keys and some change. Could you fetch my wallet and cell phone from my house? I'll buy some clothes from the hospital store and we'll have the laundry done.
Walter handed me a piece of paper with his address on it, so I took it and asked him, "Do you trust me?"
You've given me your business card. You're a banker. I assume you understand how important trust is in your profession. Even without that, I would trust you.
Walter took out the keys from a drawer and entrusted them to me.
It's getting late. You should head home.
he urged me. After returning home, I checked Walter's address and found it was an apartment near the nearest station. Thinking I could just make it back to the hospital in time for visiting hours, I pedaled at full speed to his apartment. Once inside, I quickly found a wallet and cell phone right where he had described. Walter's room was neatly arranged, and there was a photo of a woman I presumed to be his wife. Knowing he would be hospitalized for a week, I decided to also take the cell phone charger with me, packed everything into a bag, and headed back to the hospital. By the time I arrived at the hospital, I was exhausted and my legs were shaking, but I was happy to be of help and didn't mind the fatigue. I knocked on the door of his room, and when I opened it, Walter was having his meal and looked surprised to see me again.
What is it? Did you forget something?
I brought your wallet and cell phone. The address was close by, and I thought it'd be better to bring them sooner. I also brought your cell phone charger.
That's very thoughtful of you. Honestly, it helps to have them sooner. I forgot to mention the charger. I was thinking of buying one from the store, so you've saved me the trouble,
he said with a grateful smile. As visiting hours were almost over, I told him I'd come again tomorrow and left the room to head home. That night, perhaps due to the satisfying tiredness, I slept well. For the next week, planning to visit the hospital after work, I got up early, went to the office, and got on with my tasks. Working alone in the office early in the morning, each colleague who arrived greeted me.
Good morning. You are working hard early. Going to the hospital after hours?
Good morning. Yes, I've been told I don't need to do overtime for a while, but I want to handle my responsibilities, so I've decided to start early.
That's good. Let us know if there's anything we can help with. Call on us if you have urgent work.
While we were talking, John, who had just arrived, overheard us.
Talking big for someone who can't even do his job properly. Don't rush. Come to work at your own pace. I'll check all the work you've done. Show me what you've completed.
His words were tinged with his usual tough love, but they carried a note of kindness.
Don't look at me with that goofy smile.
He scolded as I couldn't help but grin. Thus, with John and everyone else supporting me at work, I was able to head to the hospital after hours. At the hospital, Walter was able to move around and take care of personal chores like laundry on his own, so there wasn't much for me to help with. However, I couldn't bear to leave him alone and stayed until the end of visiting hours. We started with small talk, but eventually, we discussed family matters, and I asked about the woman in the photo I had seen in his room. Yesterday, when I was in your room, I noticed a photo of a woman. Was that your wife? She looked young and beautiful.
Yes, that was Mary. She passed away 30 years ago. We were married for 10 years before she died of an illness in the winter of our 10th year. Since then, I've lived alone. People have worried and introduced me to others, but I've never met anyone like Mary. She was that special to me.
Walter, you're a very devoted person, aren't you? Then Walter began to share more about himself.
Yes, when I met Mary, I was aimlessly wandering without working. Eventually, she became pregnant, but she miscarried due to her overworking. After that, we were never blessed with children again. I felt so guilty seeing Mary so down, so I changed my ways and worked tirelessly. And then I started my own company. It grew quickly as more people joined, and I built a house in a prime location in the city. Mary and I lived there. but then she was diagnosed with cancer and passed away. I eventually handed over the house and the company and now live in that apartment.
Walter's sad expression almost brought tears to my eyes. I then shared my own past with Walter. My dad died in a construction accident 5 years ago, right on the day of my college acceptance announcement. Since then, my mom worked hard to send me to college, and 3 years ago, she died in a car accident from falling asleep at the wheel. I managed to graduate using my mom's life insurance, some part-time jobs, and scholarships. I had no siblings, and not much contact with relatives, so I'm pretty much alone. I said, trying to lighten the mood, but Walter was moved to tears. I felt grateful to meet someone who would listen and cry with me. Despite the age difference, I could feel a friendship between him and me. And Walter seemed to feel the same way.
I've never shared such personal stories with someone I've just met. If I had a grandchild, they'd be about your age, but strangely, I feel a close connection to you.
I was touched by his words. I felt the same way. If you're okay with it, Walter, I'd like to keep in touch moving forward.
Delighted to.
As I reached out to shake his hand, Walter reciprocated.
The doctor will explain my test results tomorrow. How about it? Will you come listen with me? It starts at 4 p.m.
As we let go of each other's hands, Walter asked me, "Really? I'll talk to my boss tomorrow and see whether I can make it or not. I'll let you know."
Understood. Sorry for the sudden request.
It's okay. We're good friends, aren't we? I had a conversation with him until the end of visiting hours, when I passed a nurse talking to me as I was leaving.
You really look like a grandfather and his grandson. Walter has been hospitalized here several times, but I've never seen him enjoy his stay like this. Usually, he's in a bad mood even when people visit him.
Really? There were people visiting him.
Walter used to be the chairman of his company. I think they were his employees, but usually, he'd yell at them and send them away.
Really? He's been hospitalized several times.
It's cancer. The cancer has recurred. He's undergoing chemotherapy because it's detected during regular checkups. He's the type who can't stay still, always eager to be discharged.
I see. He asked me to listen to the test results with him tomorrow. I definitely have to be there for him.
Are you sure about work? He spoke highly of you. You're exactly as Walter described.
Flustered by her compliment, my ears turned red, and I quickly left the room. The next day, after discussing with Tom and John, I was able to take the afternoon off. I called Walter right away. "Hello, this is Michael. I got the afternoon off. I'll be there by 2 p.m. I deliberately sounded cheerful.
That's great. Thank you. I'll be waiting in my room at 2.
Walter sounded pleased, apparently telling someone nearby that I was coming. Yet, I had mixed feelings. What if the test results show the cancer has recurred? What if it has spread? How should I comfort Walter? With these thoughts, I left work and headed to the hospital. When I arrived, Walter greeted me with his usual smile.
You came early. Thanks for making the time for me today.
He apologized, looking a bit guilty. No problems. We're good friends, right? This is more important than work. We sat and talked about hobbies for a while. Our shared passion was traveling, and we exchanged photos and stories of places we had visited. enjoying our time until it was almost time to hear the test results. As the moment approached, our conversation dwindled. Then footsteps approached down the hall, and a knock came at the door. Nurse entered.
Walter, the doctor is ready for you in the consultation room.
It always feels like a prisoner receiving a sentence at this time.
Walter muttered, looking my way. I was caught off guard and couldn't find the words to respond, taken aback by his remark. Seeing my confusion, Walter asked seriously,
When I'm discharged, would you like to go on a trip together?
Absolutely. I've got plenty of paid leave, and we could really celebrate your recovery. This time, I managed to respond properly. As we entered the examination room, there were X-ray images displayed, and we were seated in front of them as the doctor began to explain. Listening to the doctor brought back the emotions I felt when my parents died. Life can be so merciless. I barely absorbed what the doctor was saying. Walter, perhaps prepared for what was to come, spoke calmly with the doctor. When I came to, they were discussing future treatment options. I had only caught snippets of the conversation, but if I hadn't misheard, Walter said, "No more chemotherapy. I'm being discharged tomorrow." Before I knew it, the explanation of the test results had ended.
Let's head back to the room, Michael.
I followed him back to the room in a daze, and finally broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. It was the first time I had been present for a prognosis of terminal illness, and I couldn't handle the shock. Seeing me like this, Walter comforted me, patting my back.
It's shocking, isn't it? To receive a terminal prognosis so suddenly. I've faced this before, so I was prepared every time I was admitted. I regret having you here for this. I'm sorry.
Walter spoke soothingly. There's no God in this world. Just when I finally found a true friend, someone I could talk about anything with. I choked out through my sobs.
I feel the same way. Fortunately, it's not immediately life-threatening. I'll be discharged early, so please, let's go on that trip. I'll let you know once my discharge date is set. Until then, could you focus on your work? Otherwise, it might be hard to take time off.
I see. It's a promise. I'll do my best at work, I managed to say. Afterward, I somehow made it home, but I found myself staring at the ceiling of my room without knowing how I got there. Remembering Walter's words, I got up early the next day and went to work, determined to focus on my job. When I arrived at the office, everyone asked about the test results, so I promised to explain during the morning meeting. Thank you for letting me take the afternoon off yesterday. I need to report on Walter's test results. Mid-sentence, I broke down crying. Seeing my distress, those around me seemed to understand, and John, who was next to me, patted my back, and others shed tears with me. I can't seem to compose myself to speak properly here. I'll report by email, I said, struggling to find the words. After the meeting, I regained some composure and explained Walter's condition via email. I also mentioned the promise I made with Walter to go on a trip, and everyone responded encouragingly, telling me to go. I cried again at their kindness. In the evening, I received a call from Walter.
I'm being discharged tomorrow morning. Can I come by in the afternoon? I've been treated so well because of you, and I'd like to thank everyone in person.
I relayed this to everyone.
We finished dealing with customers by 3 p.m., so he can come in through the back around that time.
Everyone agreed, and I passed this on to Walter. The next day was business as usual at the office, and I was still being scolded unreasonably by John. As I glanced at the clock after 3 p.m., thinking Walter would arrive soon, the phone rang. John took the call, and from his responses, I could tell it was from a company that had deposited $3 billion with our bank. Watching him, John started shaking and sweating profusely. After hanging up, he slumped back in his chair as if his legs had given out.
They want to cancel. What?
Tom approached, looking worried, and asked,
John, what happened? Who was that call from?
They want to cancel their $3 billion deposit and move it to another bank.
Tom's face turned pale at John's words. We immediately called the company that had requested the cancellation to verify the facts and asked for an explanation. Tom explained that the company's president and the manager of another bank were college classmates, and the president had been persuaded to deposit the money in that bank, leading to the cancellation. Everyone who heard this explanation felt outraged and were at a loss for words. Then, amid the silent office, my cell phone rang. It was Walter.
I'm at the back entrance.
Tom instructed me to let him in, and the others pretended to return to their work. As I went to greet Walter, Walter was dressed in a suit, looking every bit the corporate executive, and I was momentarily intimidated by his presence. He must have sensed the unusual atmosphere in the office.
It seems quite tense here. Did something happen?
I quickly led him to the reception room and informed him about the large account cancellation. Tom arrived late in the reception room, exchanged business cards, and greeted him, but Walter had also given his card to Tom. When Tom saw the company name on the card, he was shocked, and I leaned in to look before our eyes met. Walter, were you the honorary chairman of that company?
Yes, I was. I thought it didn't matter, so I didn't mention the company name.
That's right. Then Walter thanked Tom.
Thank you for your consideration towards a stranger like me. I don't know how to express my gratitude. Please allow me to thank everyone.
Tom gathered everyone in the reception room, and they lined up in front of Walter.
Thanks to your understanding, Michael has been a great help to me. Thanks to him, I was able to be discharged from the hospital. I am grateful to all of you. Thank you.
Tom, flustered, responded.
Walter, please, no need for such concerns.
I can't do much, but may I deposit some of my personal wealth and a portion of my company's funds in this bank?
Why would you do that?
Are you John? Thank you for guiding Michael sometimes strictly, sometimes kindly. I was thinking about how to repay him on my way here. Rather than thanking an individual, I thought it might be good to show my gratitude to this bank. I don't believe in borrowing money, so I thought of making a deposit.
Walter had decided to make the deposit on his own, ensuring I wouldn't get in trouble. However, everyone thought it wouldn't cover the amount that had been canceled, but then Walter started calling his company.
This is Walter. I want you to arrange to deposit 30% of my personal and company funds in the bank I'll mention now. It's where my lifesaver works. Can you come here tomorrow to finalize this?
Everyone looked stunned at Walter. I couldn't help but ask, how much will that deposit be? Tom nudged me in the ribs. Walter answered with a laugh.
Well, it should be around $5 billion.
Walter mentioned an unimaginable amount.
Indeed, he's the top of a major national company.
We're saved.
As Tom and John shared a look of relief, they grabbed my hand.
Michael, well done.
For the first time, you've been of help to us. Thank you.
Although I was honestly disappointed by John's words, I was glad I could be of some help, having been a burden for so long. Walter also seemed pleased to see this.
I don't want to overstay my welcome and interfere with your work, so I'll be leaving now. Thank you all so very much.
He expressed his gratitude again, and while Tom called a taxi and waited with him, I had a private conversation with Walter. Walter, thank you. You saved this bank.
Thanks to you and everyone here, my life has been enriched. I'm glad I could be of use to someone. Come to my company tomorrow. Bring Tom and John along.
When Tom announced the taxi had arrived, Walter got in and left. We watched the taxi until it was out of sight. The next day, we went to Walter's company to discuss the deposit, and were reminded of its magnitude as a major corporation. Entering the headquarters, the gleaming floors shone brightly, catching us off guard. Struck by the receptionist's beauty, Tom was too flustered to speak properly when Walter arrived.
Oh, thanks for coming all this way. I came out to meet you. Let's go to the reception room together.
Walter led us to the reception room. After the meeting, we all had lunch together before returning to the bank. Meeting Walter by chance and calling an ambulance led to an unbelievable sequence of events, and we were all abuzz with the story on our way back to the bank. However, the excitement couldn't last. Walter had received a terminal prognosis and had opted out of chemotherapy. What will Walter do now? As I pondered this, Walter called me.
Michael, I've decided to undergo chemotherapy. I want to live longer and go on that trip with you. Let's postpone the trip I promised. I plan to fight the cancer, looking forward to our journey.
Walter's resolute words warmed my heart. I was hoping you'd live long enough to hold my children. I'll work hard so we can go on that trip anytime, so please, fight hard with the chemotherapy. I'll visit you again like before.
I don't want you to see me while I'm under the effects of the chemotherapy. I'll contact you when I'm feeling well. For a while, my staff will take care of things.
We promised to meet again and hung up. I was confident that Walter would recover and join me on our trip.